Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Blue Stable Podcast. I'm your host, Culture Shock. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. We're going to be giving you a recap of the matchup between the Detroit Lions and the Indianapolis Colts, where the Colts fall. The score was 24-6, but I'm not alone. I got my guy with me, Colts Film Room. Colts Film Room, how we doing, man?
I'm good. How are you? How are you?
I'm great, man. Appreciate you. Appreciate you for joining the show. Landon's running a little late, so I'm pretty sure he'll be jumping in eventually. But we got to talk about this game, man. This game, the Detroit Lions went to Indianapolis Colts. At first, I'm not gonna lie, I felt like the Colts they had a chance to really get it done. We got to talk about both sides of the football, of course. I feel like we're going to switch it up a little bit. I think we're going to start on the defensive side. This game, of course, it started off with the Lions just running and gashing down the field. Of course, they ran by committee. I think they called the duo Sonic and Knuckles, but those guys was pretty much they had an agenda and they pretty much did that, man. The run game for the Detroit Lions definitely took advantage of it, and Jared Goff was hitting his stride when we know it. We mentioned on the pod on the previous show that the Colts are probably one of the worst teams when it comes to third down situations, and it pretty much showed. But what was your thoughts about the Colts defense going up against this Lions team?
I mean, that you hold them to what 24 points, and they're a team that averages like 30 plus. Now, obviously, some of those averages are inflated for some of the 50 points that they put up against maybe some lesser teams. I would say it was overall solid performance. It wasn't great. It wasn't there when it mattered, but again, like you hold a team to 24 points, 24 points in the NFL, you should be able to get the job done. That's enough to get the job done. I think when you don't have any turnovers, which Indianapolis didn't, so it's not like they lost the turnover battle per se, but you don't have any turnovers on your own right. Like you couldn't get those extra possessions, and kind of like the offense put them in some tough spots, and they battled through it. And I thought this could have easily gone terribly in the second half, where this thing is we're talking like 30 plus, like given how the offense performed, but it wasn't. So I think that you can look at where you've gone through the quote unquote gauntlet at this point in the season, and honestly, the Colts defense has survived it. For the most part, they played pretty well against Buffalo. They played pretty well against Minnesota. They played pretty well. I would say pretty well against the Lions. Now, I think they probably could have played better, but they played pretty well against the Lions. And I mean, I think you're going to look at the end of the year and be like, man, Gus Bradley isn't the same Gus Bradley that we were chewing out every week last year. And maybe even the first couple of weeks. This is not September or early October Gus Bradley. Ever since that Jaguars game, things have looked totally different in Indianapolis.
I agree with you. Like I said, I think we both can agree this defense definitely has to get credit where credit is due. Of course, we were very critical of them early on in the season, but you seen them flip a switch, and they started to get a little bit more aggressive and change the disguise of the defense. And against this Detroit Lions team that pretty much does what they want against a lot of teams, I think this is one of their toughest opponents. And I'm not even trying to be biased when it comes to the Colts, but when you look at the yard percentage and things of that nature, the Colts pretty much held a team that can score with ease.
They're the favorite to win the Super Bowl. They are the
absolutely
favorite to win the Super Bowl. So that was easily the toughest team on their schedule. Don't necessarily love being 1-3 in the NFC North, but that's a tough division this year.
Probably the best division.
Probably the best division that you have. So, yeah, I think to me, I have less to say about the defense because we know who the defense is. I thought DeForest Buckner had a really good game. Latu had a strip sack and got some pressure off the edge. It was really nice to see. Zaire had an up and down day, I would say, but he had a couple nice plays in key situations. Samuel Womack's got to catch that pick, but for the most part, like they didn't let this thing run rampant. Didn't let Jameson Williams hit one over their heads. This is a unit that you start to kind of believe in, where it's like, I don't think I could say. I thought a lot of the noise around the Colts last year was all the defense and the secondary kind of held them back. Didn't really do anything to adjust to it. Jalen Jones is a 7th round pick that's a viable starter in this league. Now, is he a great player? No. Is he a good player? Absolutely. And that's how I kind of feel about Womack too, is they found him when Juju Brents went down, and that's kind of where we're at right now. It's a good unit that's really, I think, outplaying expectations, even with a lot of key veterans on the field.
Absolutely. It's definitely a next man up philosophy when it comes to that secondary or even the defense in general. But Jalen Jones definitely said he had himself a game. Definitely shout out to him. And now the guy we were looking for has finally made it. Appreciate you for joining the show. Shout out to Landon. Landon, how we doing?
Well, doing good. Sorry, guys. I just actually literally walked in my door. I had a late work call that just popped up, and I thought I was going to be able to make it back before this started, but yeah, here I am. 10 minutes.
There you go.
We appreciate you. I said I told Coach Filmer before the show that he's going to be grounded when I finish talking to him after the show, but we appreciate you for joining.
We're just talking defense.
Absolutely. But what was your thoughts about the defensive performance? I felt like, that was pretty much life of the game. Of course, they had their chance on offensive side that we'll talk about next, but the defense definitely had spurts where they gave the offense the chance, but we just couldn't figure out. But what was your thoughts on the Colts defense?
I mean, it was okay, I guess. It's not like overly impressive. Like, it kind of went the way I expected it to go, like kind of the things we pointed out prior whenever we did our preview, running the ball, missed tackles, passes in the middle of the field.
The third downs.
Yeah, third downs. What is there really else to say other than they failed at all those things? They really isolated the linebackers. They were 12 targets against the linebackers. They were 12 completions. I mean, what can you really do? And I honestly thought it could have been worse. Like, going back and watching the game, it really did feel like Detroit never truly felt threatened in this game, and they just kind of coasted, which, coming from watching the Colts,
I think
Peyton Manning era, I've seen that game plan many a times where you can afford to play not your A game. They didn't bring their A game, but it truly never felt like they were threatened. There was a lot of drives that they were just able to sustain with third down conversions, time of possession, get it to the goal line and punch it in for a touchdown. And that's just, it wasn't awful, but I'm not going to sit here and say the defense had a good day. Like, it wasn't good, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been.
This is what I had said is like, it's tough to play defense, consistently go out there. I think the toughest thing on defense is when the offense goes, you battle to get a punt, which they got a couple of those. And then after maybe a long drive too, and the offense goes out there 3 and out, and you're right back on the field. You don't get a chance to catch your breath. I thought the offense made it difficult on the defense to really go play good football. And now this is a team that averages 33, I think, points a game.
Almost 30. It's like 33.8.
33. You held them to 23. Now, that's inflated, obviously, because of the 50 points. So, like, when people say they average 33, they don't actually have – I mean, they do, but against maybe more quality opponents that aren't the Jaguars or the Cowboys from earlier, the Titans, they are
more than 23 or 24. Okay.
24. So, like, to me, it's tough because I think that, like, that game potentially goes, like, differently if the offense applies more pressure. You're not exactly having to play. Like, I think you're right. I think it's a great way to put it. Is like, I don't think the Lions were necessarily playing with their A game offense. They also didn't really need to. When you're holding,
that's
when you're
kind
holding 6 points.
Kind of what I was saying is, like, it never felt like they truly felt like they need to, like, put the pedal to the metal, and start going after, and that's weird for a Lions team that we've seen multiple times kind of put their necks on people's throats, and really kind of, I'm not going to say run up the score, but really apply pressure to the point to where they're just getting away from people very quickly. because once that dam breaks, it usually breaks in a big way. It never felt like the Colts let the dam break fully. They kind of kept it patched together, but there were definitely some big cracks and the water was leaking. But it just, it could have been better. Namely, like the linebacker play in this game was horrendous. It was terrible.
Yeah, that's probably more. I was a little more generous, but like,
no, it was bad.
You don't have to be generous.
No. I'm not gonna let you do that. It was not great. It was not good.
It was bad.
There was a couple good plays from at least Zaire Franklin in this game.
There was a couple.
There were
Zaire
Franklin had his moments.
Fourth down stop was a good play. No, the fourth down stop was a good play. I agree.
He had a couple good shots at the pass, rushing the pass.
Yeah, there were a couple good rushes whenever they let him rush the passer and blitz. Just something he does at a very good level. I think they need to do more of, honestly. But for the most part, as far as tackling, pass coverage, basically everything that a linebacker is asked to do on a down-to-down level, outside of because you're not going to rush your linebacker every play. You're not going to shoot the gap on fourth down every play. Your every down stuff that you're asking him to do, he was not good at in this game. Like it just wasn't good.
Yeah.
PJ Speed, I think, was more average. Like he wasn't quite as bad as Zaire was in this game. It still wasn't great, but you could kind of get by with that if somebody else is picking up the slack. I thought Nick Cross had a really good game.
I agree. So Zaire Franklin for me had a couple really good moments, and then the rest was really, really bad. That's probably the more accurate way to explain it.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. But like that, if everything else is really, really bad and it's just a couple good moments, to me, you had a really bad game. Like that's It's not good. I was impressed with Nick Cross in this game. I think Nick Cross played a really, really great game. The defensive line, I think we really need to give a shout out to that. That was the whole reason that the dam didn't break, is because the defensive line. I thought they did a fantastic job for the most part in the run game. I think Grover Stewart was really good. DeForest Buckner, while it wasn't like his best game as far as that goes, it was still more than good enough. Latu, I think this might have been his best game of the season. He was everywhere. He played fantastic. Defensive line did their job. I thought the cornerbacks did their job pretty well. I think Kenny Moore had kind of a rough day, but overall, the DBs, I thought Jalen Jones had a good game. I thought Sam Womack, outside of really one play,
dropped an interception.
I thought Sam Womack had a really strong day as well. They didn't really target the outside very much. I mean, they knew what everyone else knew. They knew what the bread and butter of attacking this defense is, and that was attacking the Colts in the middle of the field. They didn't have to go outside. You could run the ball, attack the middle of the field, and you're usually going to have a very positive day against this defense.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with everything that Landon's saying. I think it's one of those things too that I mean, it's the Lions. Like this is they've done this to a lot of good players. They are that good. I'm not gonna sit here and say like the house is burning down. What do you call it? What's the phrase? There's a phrase there.
Yeah, the house is on fire.
Yeah.
The meme where the dog is sitting in the kitchen.
This is fine.
We're officially over the quote unquote gauntlet now. Denver is heating up, so I think that is a potential game to look at down the line. However, you're over the quote unquote gauntlet, and I would say that the Colts defense got out pretty good for the most part. I think that they survived it way better than expectations would have led you to believe. I think the biggest concern of everyone this entire year was the secondary. That's proved to be to work out pretty well. Nick Cross has really asserted himself as a legitimate safety in this league. Jalen Jones is turned from a 7th round pick to I'm not going to say like a great player, but a good player.
He's a cornerback. He's a second cornerback that you can win games with.
Yeah,
if he's your second guy, you can win games with Jalen Jones.
Exactly. you have, yeah, I mean, Samuel Womack was a good claim at the end of the day. Like, he's played good football for sure. And you've gotten out of that gauntlet pretty good. So I have no qualms necessarily over the defense. I think when you look at it, there's veterans that are going to show up every Sunday. There's some weak pieces on this team that are massively inconsistent, and it can be a really good day for them or one of the worst days that you've ever seen. And ultimately, that's just kind of who this defense is. And they played to really a high floor, low ceiling defense this year. Where like they're because of the way and that's kind of the way that Gus Bradley wants it. Go out, be consistent, keep the points down. We'll live with the rest. And that's kind of ultimately, I think they did that in multiple spots. And this game looks a little bit different if the offense is applying some more pressure to the Lions offense. I always think that changes the narrative of the game or the game script, quote unquote. And how a play caller would go about it. Because I felt like once they lost David Montgomery, they pulled him. Just let's run the ball with Gibbs. Let's get some quick game. There's a lot of quick game in this from Ben Johnson and just attack the voids in the zone. And that's really what it was. So obviously we have way more to talk about on the offensive end, but
yeah, I mean, I'm still like, I don't think the defense has been horrendous. I don't think, and this, I don't know, you'll probably disagree with me on this. I don't think this is a defense that is going to lead you moving forward to winning. Like, this isn't championship level play.
I don't necessarily think that either. What I think is, like, when you look at the problems of the Colts and where
this is a 500 defense. This is a Chris Ballard defense.
I think it's better. It's better than a 500 defense.
No, this is a 9
playoff defense.
Yes, this is a 9-8 defense.
I disagree with that. I think, but marginally though. Like, this is not a Buffalo defense. This is not a Minnesota defense. This is not the Ravens defense from last year. This is not some sort of elite defense at all. No way. But I think this is a defense that, if you could have a productive offense, can get you into can compete with playoff.
I agree.
I don't think that they're going to ultimately, when they run into these elite units, they will not be able to hold up.
Yeah,
I'm with you on that.
That's me.
But I don't think that this is. I think this is a top half of the league defense. I do. Not much more than that, but top half. I would say it's a.
I just think the things that they struggle with are all things that pertain to winning football games. And that's where I have a big problem with it. Like, they're one of the worst defenses in third down percentage. Like, they give up third downs, fourth downs constantly.
But ultimately, like, and this is kind of where you can have all these debates, and it's so true, because that's what makes them not an elite defense, is they can't get off the field in those scenarios. But they also do, when they have to make the play, they do make it. A lot of the time, their red zone defense is often pretty good. I wish I had the stats on hand, but they're really a bend but don't break unit.
Yeah, I think they've been a little bit better. I'll push back on them whenever they have to make a play. They do, because I know we talked about this.
Well, okay. Well,
it's like, because how many times have we seen whenever it's like, the Colts defense needs to get a stop here? How many times have we seen them fail to get that stop? Another team goes down, kicks a field goal.
They have a 64% success rate, 1.2 EPA per game, 22 points a game. That's not 22 points is what they're averaging versus a schedule that I think they played some prolific offenses minus Miami that really has had Tyler Huntley out there, 5.6 yards per play, 142 rushes. I mean, it's not like great, but it's not.
It's mediocre.
There will be there. It's top.
It's not great, but it's not terrible. It's right in the middle.
I think it's still top half. I think it's still top half. This was a top 10 defense at one point. I don't think it is anymore, but it was. All right, Landon's pessimistic.
Yeah, that was good.
But I agree with him. I agree. Here's my overarching point.
See, like, this defense can be. I don't know how. And like, this is the point I wanted to make whenever unfortunately I was late, is usually whenever Marcus asks you, like, what were your thoughts on the game? How are you feeling? is like I truly don't know how to feel anymore about this team. Like I truly don't, because like I can find good things that are positive that like I'm happy with this team, but they're still losing ball games, and the majority of the like there's also a lot of things that I really don't like, and so I don't know where I really stand on this team right now. Like that's just kind of where I'm at. Is like I don't know whether to be pessimistic whenever I can find so much that is optimistic. It's just kind of
so like. Yeah, great. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, that's just where I'm very much like this team. Like, I'm right in the middle. Like, I'm 9-8 or 7-10.
Yeah,
or 8,
this is what this team is. It's mediocre. Yeah. It's not bad. It's not bad because I think what the expectation is that the Colts can go on a little bit of a run here versus some opponents that have pretty much mailed it in for the season, all that kind of stuff. I know you're laughing because you're about to say that they're going to lose these games. Because I know what you're saying.
Because history has shown
that they would do that. We'll see if that happens. I just think that we could sit here in a scenario that does not happen, and they've gone on a three-game streak. Everyone's talking about how amazing this team is, and we're just like not going to do the flip side. So we'll talk about this team like they're the best thing ever when they've gone 3 wins straight versus the Giants, the Patriots, and the Titans, or whatever the schedule is. But we wouldn't sit here and say we need to give them some grace because they're clearly not as good as the league's Super Bowl favorite. So like that's my pushback, is that like this is not the game for me to make a clear evaluation on to make any sort of take on the defense, where it's like find me a team like Denver that's probably more in their wheelhouse of like fringe playoff and see how they compete there, and then we can talk. I know my expectation is not for Indianapolis to go play against the Lions, who are an absolute juggernaut. Like that's not my expectation of this team.
I don't know. Like that's the thing though, is like I'm not even ready to really put them in the Broncos category, because what the Broncos 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, the Broncos are 7-5. The Colts are 5-7.
The Broncos have played the Raiders twice. Go look at the schedules. Like there's a clear. They haven't had to play the NFC North. I'll tell you that. They've played the NFC South and they've played the AFC. Well, the AFC West, which I guess they haven't. I don't think they played the Chiefs. Well, they played the Chiefs once.
They have had an easier schedule for sure.
That's that point. That
matters. But let's also, I mean, they took Kansas City.
I'm not saying that Denver's bad. I'm not saying Denver's bad at all.
Yeah, it's just kind of, I don't know. You hear this a lot in football circles. Like, I don't know if you necessarily agree with it because it misses so much context, but like, you are what your record says you are. I mean, like you are.
Yeah, right now, your record isn't just a binary 7-5. Like, you know what I mean? That's not.
They have a chance. Like, they have everything in front of them. They have a chance to flip the narrative.
They have a chance to potentially even win the South. That's not too crazy to even.
They have given themselves literally no room for error. Like, you literally have to run the table from here on out. You got to run the table.
Yeah,
if they lose a game,
I think we're in the reality that this is pretty. I'm probably willing to say that this is more not a playoff team than it is a playoff team. And this is why I think at the very end I love to talk about things that have crossed my mind today about the offseason, because I think this is a trickier offseason than potentially it was last year.
I agree.
Where I think that
there's a lot of.
Let's get to the offense first. I just wanted to. I think that's something I wanted to talk about today because it was on my mind. I think that like the next offseason will be way bigger than it probably has ever been for this franchise ever.
There's a lot of hard.
Not ever. That was dramatic. That was not ever.
No, I agree. There's going to be a lot of hard conversations that need to be had this offseason.
Yeah,
shouldn't be that hard in my opinion.
Well, I mean, yeah, not. I mean, no,
I think it's. I
disagree.
agree with what you're saying. Where it's like, but you're at a crossroads. You really are. Like, which is funny because I feel like Chris Ballard has said that before. But this we'll get to it. Let's get to the offense. I want to.
Yes, absolutely, man. We got to talk about the bright spot of the picture, but of course, social media. Love social media, by the way. They take this as we predicted. This performance just goes off the rails. Even Landon was going back and forth on social media yesterday, and I enjoyed every second of it. Anthony Richardson's performance, of course, goes unnoticed just because of stat watchers. But if you actually watch the game, and I think we all could agree, I think he had a very solid game and was let down due to the offensive side of the football. And of course, we can pretty much mesh both of these in the same conversation. The offensive line, all of those rookies on the offensive line showed their face again. It was pretty much an embarrassing performance. Not even the rookies. You can even mention Quentin Nelson in there as well.
I was going to say, it ain't just the rookies.
Yeah, the whole offensive line had a pretty awful performance. And it pretty much Richardson tried to do what he could. I mean, he had a lot of good footballs thrown. And, but at the end of the day, the offense just couldn't get much out of there. So the performance of the week for the Colts was Matt Gay. But, Landon, we can start with you. What was your thoughts on the offensive line of Anthony Richardson?
Well, let's just start with the offensive line. They look like they're playing 3 rookies out there. And this is kind of what I was saying a few weeks ago whenever Ryan Kelly went down has Ryan Kelly played great football this year? No, he is not. But I thought this game really showcased what they are missing whenever he is out. And that's the mental aspect of the center position and being able to get guys in the right areas. Like they were killed by stunts the entire day. They could not pick up a stunt on the interior to save their life. A lot of that now has fallen on Quentin Nelson to be the one to recognize those and pick those up. And unfortunately for him, he's got a rookie to his left, a rookie to his right, and a rookie to his other right. And those guys just aren't seasoned enough to be up to speed to kind of combat that level of sophistication when it comes to rushing from a defensive line. And the lines do it as good as anybody. Aaron Glenn has done a phenomenal job with that unit. And it's really struggling. And I also think that's why you're seeing Quentin Nelson's kind of struggling the last couple of weeks, is because he has so much pressure on. And look, this is not an excuse for Quentin Nelson. He's making $20 million. He's a former All-Pro. He's on a Hall of Fame level trajectory for an offensive guard. There's no excuse. He's got to be better. You just have to. When you're making that kind of money as a guard, you've got to be better. And he had his fair share of times where he got put on his ass.
He's the third most penalized offensive lineman in the league.
Yeah. Yeah, it's mental errors. He's getting put on his ass far too much. He's got to be better. But I don't think it's doing him any favors as well whenever he has so much on his plate right now that he has to worry about, because you don't have the along the offensive line now. This team can't get Bernard Ryman or even, I'm not even going to say Ryan Kelly. I think Ryan Kelly would help some.
No, I would say he would help a lot. I would say he would help a lot.
I think Bortolini has, in a vacuum, Bortolini has been a better blocker in a vacuum, but I think you're really, really missing the mental presence that Ryan Kelly brings you and the veteran leadership that he's bringing you.
Continuity, and that's
continuity is a big
thing. We like to bash Chris Ballard. We don't always agree with everything he says, and totally fair, all those kind of things. I do think he has some philosophies that I really, really agree with, and one of them is continuity on the offensive line.
It's a must.
I think when you get into the scenario that Houston's going through right now, where you're like, oh, well, let's plug this guy here, but maybe move him here because he might be good, and we're just going to move you to right guard and center. I don't think that necessarily makes any sense to me at all. The more games that you do play together, the more you play together as an offensive line and not just individual players playing one position. I think every time that you've seen this unit get banged up, obviously, they don't play together anymore. And I think that's when you look at and this is why I thought Mark Glowinski, it wasn't a coincidence that they signed him to the practice squad. I really don't. I think that what they're hoping for is when you get into December football and everything, chips are on, all chips are in, all the whatever cliches you want to use, your most important games of the year, they want to go to, hey, we have Bernhard Raimann, we have Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, that whole right side, the 4 of the 5 offensive linemen have played a lot of games together. And that's the hope, is that you bring back some of that continuity, you pick up more of those stunts, and you'll be in a position to play your best football on the offense.
It's also understated as well, like when it does come to the Glowinski thing, whenever he signed with the New York Giants, one of his assistant offensive line coach was Tony Sperano. So everybody comes out and they're like, well, like this is a new coaching staff. He played with Frank Reich. He hasn't played with Shane Steichen and all that. A lot of the blocking schemes with Tony Sperano and all that, he's already also familiar with because he was with him in New York. So
yeah, he was never gonna suit up last week. And I'm not sure that he's necessarily going to suit up this week either. Yeah. I think I'd be curious if he's not suited up by the post bye week. And that's kind of where I'm
really the target.
That's kind of what I'm thinking for where that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think that's a great signing personally.
And you can get Ryan Kelly back after the bye.
Because Dalton Tucker is on 2 weeks, unfortunately. And like, listen, like he's a UDFA right guard. So like, what did you expect? But like this whole thing of like, oh, we found Will Fries, a diamond in the rough. That's so awesome. Like, listen, if it's not working after 2 weeks, you just have to make changes because it's holding. I mean, he got killed on. Ali McNeil did disgusting things to him. Quinnen Williams did disgusting. He's not good enough to hold up against elite right. I mean, they're going after him as any smart defensive coordinator.
You're only as strong as your weakest.
Smart defensive coordinator. Any basic NFL defensive coordinator is going to go after a UDFA right guard who's filling in for someone. That's just how it is. The offensive line is something that I have faith in because you're going to get Ryman back, hopefully, at some point soon here. This feels like a temporary solution that just needs Band-Aids as opposed to like a total rehaul of anything else. Like I have faith, and I think everyone here should, that Quentin Nelson will turn this thing around. He makes $20 million. He's on a Hall of Fame track. He's like, I wouldn't even say that this season has been an absolute disaster. He's just had some disastrous games more than it has been. He's also done a lot of really, really, really good things this season. So I have faith that he'll turn that around. It's just hard to play football with 3 rookies on an offensive line.
I'll even say this, even if for some reason, so like, that's what I was telling Marcus. Matt Gonzalez is a rookie, right? But Matt Gonzalez, as of right now, is one of their 5 best offensive line players, regardless of position. He has been the one constant, which is so crazy to think coming in for Bernhard Raimann. Almost everybody has struggled mightily along the offensive. Like Braden Smith had a rough game. Obviously, you just talked about Dalton Tucker. We know how he's been. Quentin Nelson, horrendous game last week. Bordellini's kind of had a rough couple weeks. The only positive sign that they've had along the last 2 weeks on the offensive line is Matt Gonzalez. He has been a really good player for them. And even if for some reason you're not ready to throw in Glowinski, because he's got to get up the football. Like he just signed on a roster. He's been out all season.
I just don't think if you're talking about moving him to guard, I don't think they want to do that because they like the plug and play model and they see Gonzalez as the guy who's going to end up replacing Braden Smith.
But I think you might actually have the path moving forward of could you switch Braden Smith over to guard, which is what he was drafted to be. To what he played in college. He's played guard before. Could you move him over to guard? I'm not a fan of this because it's so hard, but you drafted him to be a swing tackle. And most of his career, he has been he's only recently been a left tackle since Raimann went down. That's the first time he's really played left tackle a lot. So he is a more natural right guard, according to him himself. He's even said that himself. He is more naturally fit and more comfortable at right guard or right tackle. I meant not right guard, at right tackle. So could you even kick Braden Smith inside to play right guard, flip, Gonzalez to his more natural position of right tackle? I think that could be a viable path moving forward. There are ways around this. They don't have to continue to struggle through this. There are ways around this. The main piece that's got to get healthy is you got to get Ryman healthy. I think you got to get Ryman healthy.
Ryman's got to get healthy, and I think, and I know fans that don't like this because I think these narratives start, and then people don't. I
think you got to get Kelly healthy.
You have to get Ryan Kelly healthy, and I think that not for the fact of because Tanner Bortolini, I think, will ultimately replace Ryan Kelly. And if you saw my Twitter, I did this thing about offseason priority. I didn't really mention Ryan Kelly. My whole thing with that is you'll have to see what Ryan Kelly's because he hasn't been able to stay healthy. You're not going to be able to pay him the money he probably wants. Ultimately, I think the Colts are pretty conservative in a good way, I think, when it comes to giving out money for people who have proven to be injury prone throughout their career. They won't do it. And I think that's kind of where they're at with Ryan Kelly, but you need him out there. And I know he hasn't played his best year, but you just need him. You need the starting unit out there again. And you'll never get it because of Will Fries, but if you can live with just one guy instead of three, you'll be better off. So I don't want to talk too much about the offensive line, or I don't have too much to say rather, just because I think this is it's a Band-Aid that needs to be fixed when you start to play really important games.
Yeah, dude, it's tough. I can't
say
you can survive one guy going down a lot of the times. You can survive that. It gets really tough when two guys go down. It gets really tough. It's borderline impossible when 3 or 5 of your starters are out. It's hard. You just no team. If the Lions, as great as the Lions' offensive line is, as great as they played, if they lose 3 of their 5 starters on offensive line,
it's tough. It's not. No one should sit here and be well, Chris Ballard didn't. Well, I'm not here to even say that necessarily because do you not understand that
you might have
lose 3 guys on the offensive line?
That's what I'm saying. It's you might have 2 viable guys. It's hard to get 2 viable backups on the offensive line. Just 2. If you have 2 viable guys that you can throw in due to injury, you have a great depth along the offensive line. If you can throw 2 guys in there, nobody has 3. Nobody. You cannot point to one team in the league that has 3 viable backups along the offensive line. It's not a single one.
Tough. I think we should talk about the other thing holding this unit back.
Do we want to?
Well, you got to mention Anthony Richardson first.
Oh,
do we want to talk about that group, or do we want to?
The tight end group,
Richardson to be last.
You can say that. You want to talk about the tight ends first?
Yeah, let's talk about your group there, man.
Yeah, my twin is.
So when you talk about the tight end, and I don't think we need to even tee it up because I think if you're listening to this, you know what everyone else knows. This is none of these guys that are in the room would start for anyone in the league.
If they'd even be 2s, they'd be 3rd.
I think they would go ahead and be 2. I think people would take more cost for sure. Drew Ogletree is the only guy under contract next year in this tight end room. Will Mallory,
Jelani Woods still in contract.
Jelani Woods as well. Jelani Woods is in danger of potentially not making the team next year.
He's got to have a strong offseason, strong.
Unfortunately, and I think where you're at with this unit is and here's the way that I think about the tight end position. I don't think that necessarily the Colts think about it the same way, but this is how I think about it. It's a math problem at the end of the day because you don't have a guy that can do both. So when you have a guy that's your receiving threat, so let's call it Kylan Granson and calling him receiving. There's the air quotes, but I'm just saying that he's your best pass catcher. No one is believing that Kylan Granson is going to go ahead and get on the line of scrimmage and block. He's an H-back for all intents and purposes. So the way that I think about that is you have run pass tells. When Kylan Granson is out there, there's only a certain amount of runs that you can run, and defenses know that. They're not stupid. They also know that when Mo Alley Cox is on the field, he's either going to be a part of 7-person pass protection and he's going to be a pass protector, or he's going to run a route that you really don't have to worry about until you're in the red zone. So that's kind of where it's at. And you're losing one guy in the receiving pattern, essentially, every time you go drop back to pass. And then you're losing a guy potentially in the run blocking unit that you have to overcome with RPOs every single time. It's just not sustainable. So like what makes a guy like George Kittle so dangerous is because when he's out there, it's 50-50 run pass. He can do anything that you ask him to, and he run the entire route tree, and he can block inline wide tight end on duo if you wanted to. He can do all of it. When you get to some of these tight ends are just big receivers, right? But the Colts don't even have someone that can be that much of a receiving threat. They can overcome the fact that, hey, like you're not exactly going to be the guy that's going to be like blocking exactly the blocking tight end. So like schematically, it creates more issues than it does solving problems. And I think that's what a tight end like George Kittle
is this conversation. Is this why you wore that hat today?
PSU? No, I've worn this in the past couple ones. But yes, it is. I'm obviously on the I have biases. I will not lie. You don't have to look hard. I have biases. But I do think Tyler Warren, it would be fantastic in this offense, but I think they ultimately just need a guy to solve that problem. It's holding the unit back. We saw specifically in Detroit was probably the worst game where like these problems, like there's a spotlight right on these problems every time. Colin Granson can't identify the fact that he's got to run a sight adjust, or no one's covering him on an all go. Every time,
Drew Ogletree,
even when Mo Alley Cox is getting trampled in pass protection versus the line. So it's like, what do these guys offer? And like, I'm big in the inline wide tight end. I think that's a big deal. I think you have to be able to block to play tight end in this offense, and then particularly in every offense, but this one especially. So I think that's big. But then when you're Drew Ogletree and you drop a touchdown, I mean, this couldn't have been a worse day. I would not want to walk in that tight end room. I'm gonna be honest. On Monday, I would not want to walk in that tight end room and be like, here is all the yards of offense that you costed us because you couldn't do a simple basic job. And they talk about this room being unselfish or whatever, and that's all great and that's all true. But like, this is what's holding this unit back, and they need someone like that. It couldn't be more obvious. It's their most obvious need by a country mile. That like you cannot walk into 2024, and they won't because they're not going to give Colin Granson some big contract. They're not going to run it back with this group. Like they're not. Like this is just where it's at. So like it couldn't be more obvious to me that this is a unit that they absolutely need to invest in. And then even if it means Mo Alley Cox done some really nice things as a Colt, I think maybe it's time that you're an upcoming free agent.
It's been time. It's been time.
So
yeah.
I don't think I have anything there. And I think
Mo is not a terrible player. Don't get me wrong. He's not terrible. He's
not with Penn State, or
he's making 60.
He's not what Indianapolis needs.
Yeah, he's making $6 million. Like it's bad. It's a bad unit. But that's the thing is everybody knew. Everybody knew this offseason this was the weakest link in the offense. Everybody knew it, except for the one person that's actually making the decisions.
And I think that what they tried to do, and let me explain kind of where I think Chris Ballard's mind at, whether you agree with it or not. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate.
I can already tell you I'm not going to agree with it.
I know. When you looked at last year, because it wasn't this bad last year, can we all agree there? I think this is easily way worse.
I can agree.
I think that you got production from Mo Alley Cox was your go-to guy in the biggest moments last year. I can think about the pop pass versus Tennessee, the Zaire fake power versus Tampa Bay, the scissors concept versus why do I know all this? The scissors concept versus Pittsburgh. Like he did some really nice things. I think Granson actually gave you something. This year, it's totally regressed, and it's been way worse where you can't get anything out of these guys. And like that's where I'm at. Where like it's got the one. These were like a sum of its parts room. Where like maybe you could get a little bit here, maybe you could get a little bit there. There was some good blocking. You can't get anything from this group this year.
Yeah.
It's
I don't even necessarily think this offense, like, I know everybody wants the George Kittle and wants the Laporta and the Brock Bowers, which I think ultimately is what they tried to do. Nobody was willing to trade. Nobody wanted to move down to 15.
I don't think it's the coaching. I don't think it's the coaching because I think tight end is a type of thing. It's kind of like receiver. You have like flavors, like Colin Granson. Unless you're George Kittle or some of these elite guys, you're gonna really be either a big receiver or you're a big slow receiver,
You're a specialist,
or you're gonna be a guy who can really block. I think that you're getting into a capacity now where like pick one. You need someone to do something, and that's why this unit looks so bad. It's because a lot of people, when they look at the tight end position, understandably, they start looking at like fantasy numbers and they're like, oh, well, the Colts have never had anyone I can start in that's my theory anyway. Like, because the receiving production gets
even look at whenever the Colts had a guy like Dallas Clark, because that's been like the big discussion here. Like, is like, man, like I miss the days of Dallas Clark. Dallas Clark wasn't lining up and running over dudes in the run game. Like, that's just wasn't. He wasn't
as bad as Colin.
No, he wasn't a bad blocker at all. He wasn't a liability.
And that's what they had. I'm not saying that you need a guy that can do both. That's the dream.
That's what I was going to say. I don't even think we need
in 2014 when you had Kobe Fleener and you had Dwayne Allen. Kobe Fleener was not a blocker. He was your receiving type.
Definitely.
Dwayne Allen. What?
I was like, he definitely was not. He was not a blocker.
And Dwayne Allen was the guy that came in and do that. I think we're in a situation where I really like that what Landon was kind of saying is where you need a double dip because
I said triple dip. I said they need a triple dip.
Triple's dramatic for me, but because
I think there's a viable path where, and you know the model. We're both fans. You know the model where you can draft two players, take one guy early. I don't think Tyler Warren's even going to be there by the time they pick because I think they're going to shoot themselves in the foot. They're going to they're going to miss the playoffs and they're going to pick 17th. And it's the same thing as last year. Tyler Warren's probably not going to be there at 17. But even a guy like Harold Fannin, Jr., like he should be like this. If you need a tight end, this is a really good tight end class. This is a really good tight end.
I think are we in agreement? Are we in agreement that Tyler? Like, I have to watch more film.
Tyler Warren's the perfect.
I can give you a better answer in the spring, but as it stands today, and I'll admit I have not intently studied Harold Fannin. I've watched some games. What?
I think you should watch him.
I know he's different. I've seen it. I'm not like blind to it, but I haven't like studied it.
He's not the Swiss Army.
He would have to like. I will say this. I'm willing to change my mind. He would have to, like, really, really impress me for me to ever think that Tyler Warren isn't the best tight end in this.
Tyler Warren is a more complete player. Tyler Warren is the Swiss Army. Tyler Warren is the George Kittle. He can give you everything that you need at a very high level. Harold Fannin is not that.
He's probably a better receiver.
Oh, he's a fantastic receiver. Unbelievable.
He looks like a big receiver, and that's kind of where
he's a phenomenal receiver. He's not going to give you much in the way of line. He's very Kyle Pitts-ish. He's not going to line up and bowl you over in the run game. But if the guy gets the ball in his hands, he's a threat to take it to the house at any moment. But there's other good players in this draft. That's what I'm saying. I think there's a path forward where you can double dip in this draft, even late. I mean, if Warren's there in the first round, I think you got to run the card up. But if for some reason he's not, there's viable guys that you can get in the second, the third, maybe even going all the way to the
this reminds me a lot of the Laporta,
the Will Mallory draft.
Musgrave.
They took Will Mallory, 5th round.
There was tons of tight ends to come from, and they're coming out now. And I just think,
but there's this is another really strong class where I think you can double dip if you're able to get a guy early like a Fannin or a Tyler Warren. I think you run the card up. I think you draft an athlete and developmental guy in the mid to late rounds. And I think you also bring a vet in. I think you bring a seasoned vet in that room. And then you still have Jelani Woods if he even makes the roster. You have Ogletree still there. There's a path forward where they can fix this room very quickly, but they have to be willing to actually be aggressive, make the required moves.
It's staring you in the face. This is staring you.
And I'll say this because it's a double-edged sword, because how many times have we seen this with a position group that going into the season, everybody knows this position group is not good enough. And then that's where we get the memes of we like our guy, all this kind of stuff.
So DB was obviously.
I will say Chris Ballard, in a weird way, to his credit, when after the season that happens, where we all know this position group's weak, surprise, surprise, turns out to be weak during the season. Normally, the next season, Chris Ballard will attack that position.
So I agree. But I want to make this distinction. There is a clear distinction in my head between the DB thing from last offseason and this year. The DB thing in the offseason was, hey, we have some young guys that we like, that we think can actually be something. We don't want to take them off the field because we're actually impressed of what they gave us the year prior. When you look at the room this year, these are all guys that have been on your roster for multiple years in two regimes. There's no reason to say that, I'm going to expect Colin Grant to do things. What?
I said there's no reason for the "we like our guys" speech.
Then sign them back. And these are two different things, because you have a room of expiring contracts that have severely underperformed. In the DB room was, hey, we have some young guys that we think we want to see play more. And I don't necessarily think that was like the worst idea. I was pushed back on the idea that it was like the worst idea ever. I agree with it. I think we've talked about this forever. I don't see how you can look at this tight end room and say anything else other than this needs to be our top need going into the year.
I agree completely. And what I was saying though is in a weird way, and like this isn't, trust me, this is not a pro Chris Ballard thing right now. But to his credit, like whenever everybody was talking about the wide receiver group, right, and how weak it was, we had Michael Pittman Jr. They just drafted Alec, and then like the next three drafts within the first 3 rounds, they took a wide receiver every year within the first 3 rounds. They went after Alec Pierce. Very next season, went after Josh Downs. Very next season, went after A.D. Mitchell. Like whenever there's a huge weakness on a team, normally everybody knows it's going to be a weakness during the season. Surprise, surprise, turns out to be a weakness during the season. He will attack that position the next offseason in a big way. He will invest a top 3 pick in that position, sometimes multiple. So, I mean, we saw it with left tackle, like the Eric Fisher thing. Everybody knew Anthony Costanzo was retiring, and he went out and signed Eric Fisher. Not a good thing. The very next season, guess what? Surprise, didn't work. They went out and they get Bernard Ryman, and that's turned out to be a hit. And they've invested a lot in swing tackles. They take Blake Freeland. They take Matt Gonzalez. He saw the weakness at tackle and said, I don't ever want to live through this again. He's poured multiple resources into tackle.
Absolutely.
And he's done the same thing with wide receiver. So I think there is room for optimism to think that he will attack tight end this offseason. I think where he needs to get a little bit better is just not solely relying on the draft to do that. I think there needs to be.
I think tight end makes sense to be the draft. I do think I haven't checked who's available.
No, I'm saying just don't rely solely on the draft. Like you can't just throw out 2 rookies out there next year. You just can't. Like you've got to have a veteran presence in there as well. So I think, to me, it's what we talked about earlier, like the Brian Gutekunst method when we were messaging earlier. You double dip in the draft, you sign one in free agency. At least one of those 3 guys generally is going to hit for you. I think that needs to be the path moving forward. And we want to get into Anthony Richardson now.
Yeah. I think when you look at Anthony Richardson's performance, I don't have any. It's the one thing that I'll say about it is it's tough to get a true evaluation on Anthony Richardson when the supporting cast is letting him down to this degree.
Amen.
Thought he's playing quarterback better than he is, like better than he was, not just being an athlete out there or making the kind of the crazy play. The playmaking ability is obviously there. We know that he can work off schedule. He can do all those kind of things. I think he's working within structure a lot better than he has previously. I think the benching was like a really rough 2 weeks for all of us, all of them. Maybe the way it wasn't handled would have made it a little bit easier on all of us.
It was handled in the media.
I think 2 weeks into this thing now, I think you can make the argument that maybe he needed that. And I think that he's really refined a lot of parts of his game that I didn't think would be able to be fixed in that quick period of time. And I'm not going to say that they're truly fixed because it's still only been 2 games, but look, we've seen 2 games of really nice footwork, accurate passes on passes that he struggled to make previously. And they did a lot in that 14 days, clearly. So I understand it was tough. I understand that people didn't want it. I think you can also now sit here on the other side and say, maybe that was something that he needed to do at one point or another. So would you rather sat? I think the question could hypothetically be, would you have rather sat through that entire year and seen this kid get beat up when he didn't have the opportunity to breathe and then waited till a healthy offseason to reinvent himself and fix himself? Or would you rather have him sat for these 2 games and now seen a quarterback that has this newfound confidence, this newfound ability to play the position better than he has previously?
Yeah, I think for me, it's very easy to see, especially whenever you know the intricacies of quarterbacking. To me, the most stark difference has been the base that he's playing with right now. It is night and day from where it was earlier this season, and it's now been 2 weeks in a row that this is continued. So you have to hope moving forward. Are there going to be plays every now and then where he's going to fall back into that maybe a little bit because it's a repetition thing? But I would say for 90% of the game, his base is so much wider. It's not quite as narrow as it was. And the thing for me, whenever I was watching a lot of like these overthrows where he's just shooting it, sailing these passes over these guys' head, he had this real big tendency with that narrow base to kind of lift up, like you kind of bounce and then throw. He's almost stopped that completely. He's not bouncy. His base is very wide. His footwork has been, for the most part, phenomenal. And yeah, it's night and day. It's phenomenal. You can tell that they really emphasized during that 2-week span what they wanted to see from him. And the thing, and this is why I got so bullish on him in the draft process, is early on I was not a fan, like at all. I was
a fan from the beginning.
Oh, I was completely out early on because at that point, I mean, you're going in now to your 3rd year of college, and I'm still seeing just super low level quarterbacking. But where it all switched for me, I mean, and this was, August, September, October, kind of early October. Where it all flipped for me was late. You saw from mid-October, November, and December, every week, these little intricacies where he was improving constantly. And it wasn't small improvements. These were big improvements. And to me, it was sitting there and like, that tells me like, hey, this guy takes coaching and applies it. Because a lot of guys can take coaching. A lot of things where quarterbacks specifically, they struggle with is applying it on the field. So I saw him take the coaching and I saw him apply that in college. And obviously it's a huge jump from college to the NFL. So you knew it was going to be a slow play, but I never had to worry again that this guy is not going to take coaching and he's not going to apply it. So now seeing that play off in real time, and like I said, it's only been 2 weeks, long way to go, but you've seen the market improvement. And it's just the little things. He's getting through his reads just a tick faster, which is all he needed, just a tick faster. He's no longer playing, I guess, like tentative, where he's not trusting what his eyes are seeing. He's trusting in the offense, and he's trusting what he's seeing so much more. There was still one play last week where he kind of double clutched it, and there was a guy in his face. So I mean, I don't really understand. I'm not out there with with 500 pounds worth of defensive tackles in my face, but it's just the little things like that you're seeing. I agree. I think you put it very well. It's like he's doing more quarterback things. Specifically, I love, and like this is part of the completion percentage argument, right? One of the things I love seeing. Is instead of taking a bad play and making it a negative play, you live to fight another down. He only really had a couple instances, and it was really late in the game in the fourth quarter when they were trailing, and nobody's out. So he felt he had to press, and I understand that. But early on, really for 3 quarters of that game, anytime there was a negative play, instead of eating the sack, instead of forcing it into double coverage, instead of making bad plays worse, he just threw the ball away. And do you know how many young quarterbacks just struggle to do that? I would much rather have an incompletion on the stat sheet than a negative play on the stat sheet.
Amen.
And I don't understand where the disconnect is from. I mean, I get it's everyday fans and they're not going to know most of the stuff, but I feel like most average to smart football fans should understand that aspect.
They legit don't care.
Yeah, why would you want him to take a sack and to take a hit or to force it into double coverage? Just throw it away. Like you live to fight. And like Friday after, like in the movie Friday with John Witherspoon, where he made the speech, not a lot of young, he's like, you live to fight another day. Like that's what it's all about. And just to see that level, like that's what high level quarterbacks do. They don't take bad plays and make it worse.
Yeah. So I mean, I totally agree. So I think he's playing really, really well. I think it's this conundrum where like we consistently are like making excuses for Anthony Richardson, yet they keep happening. And it's really weird. And you start pointing to it because you're like, man, like I'm watching this and it's like, I think Anthony Richardson's playing really, really well. And then people will be like, well, why is this like the 8th time that we've done that? And I think that people tend to do that. Where they make excuses. And let's not act like Anthony Richardson played like he was Joe Montana.
Yeah,
I'm not saying you are. I'm not saying you are. I think that like you're looking at this and it's like this is another game where it's not as bad as it looked from Anthony Richardson. And I don't know why that keeps happening, but people just aren't on the same page. And I think some of it's on coaching. As much as I love Shane Steichen, I think you have to be critical about that. It's like, this cannot happen. Like it, and I think some of it's on coaching, but I think that where we kind of disconnect from everyone is everyone's like fire Steichen, like penalty, like these are the same repeat offenders that are consistently like you need some sort of accountability there. And I get it. It's on the head coach to go do all those things, but like you can coach up technique, all those kind of things. And if the penalties that were a problem last week, hands to the face and holding, that is losing your matchup and then just trying to make a prayer hoping the ref doesn't call it. That's what that is. That's not Shane Steichen. Like if they can play with proper technique and get their ass kicked, like that's what this is. And that's kind of what I was trying to say with the tweet is like, listen, like I get it. It starts with the head coach. You sign up for it when you are an NFL head coach that the results of the football team you live and die by all of those. They all fall on you. But also we cannot sit here and act like there's not time, that this is some like these are repeat offenders making the same penalties that are penalties that aren't too many men on the field. It isn't unsportsmanlike conduct. It isn't like there was a ticky-tacky unnecessary roughness from Jalen Jones. I'll call it ticky-tacky. I'm not getting fined for jumping on the pile. There's
the offensive pass interference was very ticky-tacky as well.
So that there were a little bit of those going in, and that's all part of it. But
that was it. All the other penalties were earned. Like using penalties as an excuse, those penalties were earned. Like they were all the correct calls. Like I don't understand using all like the refs were jobbing the Colts. I thought
no. Those were all penalties from guys losing their matchups and then
the Colts earned those penalties.
There was,
I think the only, to me, like, and Shane Steichen's not going to say this, and because like you said, we're not getting fined. I thought they didn't call it the same both ways. I thought the Detroit offensive line, they got away with a little bit more than what they were allowing the Colts offensive line to get away with. But other than that, I mean, that's not saying the Colts didn't commit those penalties. They did. And you got to be.
And that's where it's like I'm only willing to put so much on Shane Steichen, where it's like, if you're losing your matchup because you don't have the guys and they're committing penalties because of it, you have to pick one, I guess. Then would you rather that Dalton Tucker gets thrown on his butt for the 50th time in the game, or commit a holding penalty and hope the ref doesn't call it? Because that's what it felt like to me. I don't know if that, or like I'm not big and strong enough to.
And here's something too, and this is, I think I tweeted this at you too, and we had a little back and forth with it. But a lot of these guys, they have now been through 2 coaching staffs. So they've been through Frank Reich. 3 technically. They went through Jeff Saturday. And now there was Shane Steichen. At what point do we sit here and say, hey, maybe it's the players that need to.
I love that take.
Like maybe it's just not all on the coaching. Like it can't be the coaching every single time. At some point, the players on the field are the ones that have to hold the accountability. The coaches aren't out there playing. The coaches can put guys in a position to be successful. I think largely Shane Steichen has done that. But, I mean, other than Anthony Richardson, up until recently, I think early on in the season, there was a little disconnect there. I think the last 2 games have been phenomenal. But, I mean, yeah, it's like that call is stupid, but that's the rule also. Like Jalen Jones, like you got to know, that's the rule. It was stupid. You can't. But it was ticky-tacky. It was stupid. They shouldn't have called it, but that's the rule. Don't put yourself in a position to have that call made against you. At some point, the players, not the coaches, have to be the ones held accountable for their actions. We can't just constantly sit back and say the same thing we did with Frank Reich, the same thing we did, we're doing with Shane Steichen, where it's like, oh, it's got to be the coaching. He's got to get these guys right. If they can't do it, they can't do it.
It's a lot of the same guys. It's a lot of
that's what I'm saying.
This kind of gets me to like the final thing that I really, really wanted to come out here and talk about, and was like, the Colts are at a crossroads at this offseason.
And that's on Chris Ballard. That's on Chris Ballard. Like whenever you're re-signing your own guys and talking about continuity, these are the same guys that led your team to a 4-win season.
That's a good point.
These are the same guys that have not won the division in 10 years. These are the same guys that have constantly now they're going through a second regime in a coaching staff. At some point, it's got to be on those guys.
Well, because here's the way that I see the Colts, and I agree. That's a great point. These are the same guys that were there for the most part. I think some were injured. I was Jonathan Taylor being one of them. Well, he was there for most. 2022 was a blur. Let's be real. So the way that I kind of see this, where the Colts are at right now, is that you have a good, like, this is not like we are voice frustration and we get all upset and all that kind of things. It's not a 2022 year or a 2022 roster where like this is a good roster, not even close to a great one. You have some pieces to build. Like no one's out here like tear this thing down, totally tear it down. Because if you
there's a lot.
Well, those aren't people worth a damn in my opinion. Because you look at this and you're like, I see a running back that shouldn't play every single down. I see an offensive line that's super banged up but good when they're healthy. I see a young quarterback that you should believe in, and there's reason to back that up. I see a receiving core that has their true number one guy has been banged up, and everyone has unique skill sets but are still trying to piece it together, and then a slot receiver that is identifying himself as one of the premier at his position. He is a young star at this point. I see a defensive line that is really, really good. Free A.D. Mitchell, absolutely. I see a defensive line that is really, really good. I see a linebacking core that has one really, really good player. I see a secondary that has some pieces, but it comes to a point where you're going to have to part with good players to find great ones. That's really where the Colts are at. You're going to have to make some tough decisions about guys that you're going to have to let go and be like, you know what? If you go play well on another roster, that's fine. Because I think that there's some guys that the Colts will part ways with this offseason that will go play somewhere else and be a quality player for someone else. But if you're willing to do that for guys like Bobby Okereke in tough years, it might get to that at this point now, where you have to move on from really good players to find the great ones. And that's kind of where this team is at.
That's to me, like that's been the biggest knock for me on the Chris Ballard era. Is I think initially coming in, taking over the Ryan Grigson roster in 2017, which was one of the worst rosters in football. I mean, it just was like it was horrible. It was a horrible, horrible team. I mean, go look at the drafts. Go look at it. Everybody can do it. I think that's where Chris Ballard shined, is taking over an organization and getting D and F minus players and drafting and building a team with B players, with B plus players. There were a few A players sprinkled in there. Shaq Leonard, unfortunately, Quentin Nelson, Jonathan Taylor, swing the trade for DeForest Buckner. Those are A plus players. But for the most part, Chris Ballard has drafted Jags. And that's what I put on Twitter. I mean, he's a great drafter of Jags. And if you don't know what that stands for, it's just a guy. There's a lot of guys on this team that are just guys. They're not bad players. They're going to make NFL rosters. Well, that's why you see so many guys leave the Colts and they still find their way on the rosters. But there's no high-end talent at crucial positions. You don't have – I mean, who are your best players on this team? A running back, an offensive guard, a defensive tackle. Defensive tackle's great, right? I mean, he's phenomenal. Let's not get it twisted. Jonathan Taylor, great player. Quentin Nelson, great player. Those are probably the only three guys that you have that are going to touch an all-pro spot. Maybe Kenny Moore here and there. Kenny Moore's made a Pro Bowl. I don't know if he's all-pro. I wouldn't argue if you want to put him in that conversation. But that's it. You don't have any other all-pro players. Two of those three is a running back and an offensive.
You won't have any this year. I will tell you that.
Yeah, and they shouldn't. So that's what I'm saying is he's great at drafting and getting a roster to a B level. Like he can take an F level roster or a D level roster. He can get it to B. And you're not going to sink, right? This team is not, even with the quarterback situation, this team outside of 2022, they haven't really bottomed out post Andrew Luck. I don't think he has, I don't know if like it's the aggressive, like lack of aggressive nature or just unlucky. Because I know they kind of got a little bit aggressive this offseason. It just didn't work out. Guys like Danielle Hunter, guys like Xavier McKinney, they went after some dudes. They tried to trade up and go get Brock Bowers. That didn't work out. So he wanted to get a little aggressive. It just didn't work out. And that happened. But at some point, if you're going to take the next step from being a 9-win roster, an 8-win roster, constantly being one game out of the playoffs, and even if you do make the playoffs, we're under no illusions that this team is competing for a Super Bowl. At some point, you're going to have to hit on superstar, all-pro level players at important positions, at cornerback, at edge rusher, at quarterback, at wide receiver. You're going to have to get a premier player, namely a quarterback. That's the hope, right? That's what every team hopes for, is if you do hit on that guy, it's at the quarterback position. But you're going to have to eventually come into some all-pro level talent, all-pro level players. The Colts right now don't have any of those guys outside, or any of those guys that can reach that level outside of 2 or 3 guys on the roster. You're bringing 16 starters back from a team that won 4-win games, and you're telling us that you like what you have. 16 out of 22 starters from a roster that won 14 games or 4 games.
Yeah, and I think you look at the results have been terrible. I think like we've talked multiple times that I see Chris Ballard as 2 different Chris Ballards, pre the Frank Reich Chris Ballard and the Steichen Chris Ballard. And like when you look at the process has certainly changed, right? Like you will say he was aggressive. He gave, it ended up being all your guys, but he did spend money. Like it wasn't like they didn't spend money. I think they tried to make moves that didn't work out. They had a better offer for Danielle Hunter than the Texans did. He decided to choose the Texans. They tried to trade up. That is a literal fact.
Well, even just
it. That is, there is video evidence that he tried to trade up into the top 5. 1 second. The results. I like to study the process because the process will ultimately turn into results. The process was so bad in the Frank Reich era that you got the results that you earned. Here, it's a little bit tricky, and I get a little bit more confused because I think ultimately Chris Ballard had a nice process. The results haven't changed. And now I think that what you're seeing is the guys that maybe Chris Ballard paid for the most part were the right decisions to pay. You needed Grover Stewart on this team. You needed to extend to Forrest Buckner. Zaire Franklin, you needed Michael Pittman, all those things. Like, and I understand that he hasn't had the season that you wanted, but that's fine. You needed Kenny Moore. Like,
this is the best player.
The younger guys are going to just be guys at the end of the day. So I think that's what's holding this team back is the team around them. And I think that like the Colts are going to have to they're either going to they're going to either bet on the same guys again and hope that these guys randomly turn it around and maybe get aggressive in some spots, or really say, hey, like I don't want to scare people, but like you're going to talk at the end of next year, we're talking 5th-year option for Anthony Richardson. Like that's what the discussion is going to be. You need to get this guy a solid evaluation. Games like Detroit, you simply can't do it. Like it's hard for me to sit here one way or another. And like we said that Anthony Richardson played well. The film tells you that Anthony Richardson played well.
The
results don't tell you that Anthony Richardson. I'm not talking the box score. I'm talking I guess the box score doesn't tell you because you don't have enough help from the rest of your unit, and that's a problem. So I'm not saying that they have like some sort of CJ Stroud thing where they like go all in and they trade for Stephon Diggs, so they do all that because they want to maximize this window because they think Anthony Richardson is some guy. But like, what is this team? Because you have a young quarterback. Is this a young team that we're rebuilding? Or is this a team that you think that you're competing? Or are we just competing you have 2 things competing against each other? So you have to just make a decision. If you're going to go all in,
it's a weird roster.
It's a very, very weird roster and something where you're looking at this and it's like, man, like I look at all these guys and I'm like, I look at the wide receiver core. I don't think it's like a total problem. I look at the only position group that I think is a legitimate hindrance is the tight end room. Everything else is like, there's some good players in here, but they're not great. And that's why the Colts are going to consistently be where they are with a good, not great team. Yeah. So you have to.
I think there's more than just like I'll catch heat for it. I don't care. It's the internet, whatever. My wife loves me. That's all that matters. I'm not a fan of the linebacker room. I'm just not. I don't think the linebacker room is good. And
why would you? I would say the majority of Colts fans think that.
Well, because majority of Colts fans look at tackle numbers, and that's fine.
No, the majority of Colts fans think that the linebacker room stinks. By the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't think that's what I get in my mentions.
Oh. Well, no, normally it's anytime you mention anything negative about Zaire Franklin, I get people tagging him in my posts all the time.
I think Zaire Franklin's a little bit overhyped of a player when you look at the.
I don't think he's a bad player.
I think he's a quality. I think he's a starting middle linebacker, starting Mike linebacker for a lot of teams.
Yeah, I don't think he's bad. I think he's been bad this year.
I think he's been massively inconsistent because I think he's had some really nice games. Chicago was one of them, but I thought he played pretty well in Minnesota. I can think, but he's also had some terrible games. Like Green Bay was abysmal. The first Houston game was really bad. So like there's been, for me, been the problem with Zaire Franklin is he has had these swings of being so up or down, and more down than up. Not enough up.
Yeah,
There's not enough up there. He has not had the year he wants.
I think too. I think end of
He
the
is still, but I promise you, if Zaire Franklin was to get cut today, almost every team would put a claim in for him.
Yeah, he's a good player you want on your roster.
Maybe the 49ers would be
I think the disconnect for me is I think he's closer to Anthony Walker than he is to Shaquille Leonard. And
yeah, but those are two different players, right?
Yeah.
Like Shaquille Leonard was never a Mike linebacker.
No, yeah, but I meant like as far as impact goes. Not like player. I mean, like as far as the impact.
I agree with you. I think what Zaire Franklin does a lot of. I think that's why I think it's different impact, because Zaire Franklin will never have the turnover numbers because his position doesn't necessarily get you there. He does a lot of the dirty work that when you're watching the game live and whatever, you'll see him. The Grover will protect him and he'll go make a tackle for like a 3-yard gain that you don't really notice, but the really bad linebackers don't make that tackle. There's some plays that he makes where he'll spill a ball back outside into a tackler out in space, or he'll leverage a ball back inside and force it back inside. And maybe he didn't even come back with a tackle. I think there's some really little things. And then how he can rush the passer. He's a really good.
I think they really need to utilize that more with him. I really do.
I think they do it a good bit, but I would like to see it more. I agree. I don't necessarily think they don't do it, but I think that I
think just where for me,
that's his best quality in my opinion.
For me, it gets old every week, like watching teams, and like that's what good teams do. That is what it is. But it's just such a stark difference between having like Bobby Okereke and Shaquille Leonard together, where both of those guys were really good for the most part Shaquille Leonard, he kind of struggled a little bit in pass coverage, but he made up for it with interceptions, right? The turnovers and stuff. I
don't think Shaquille Leonard really struggled in pass coverage.
I'm not saying he was bad. I don't think he was. Bobby Okereke, he was phenomenal in pass coverage. Phenomenal.
Yeah, I agree.
But you don't have the impact plays.
So we just got a comment. Is he the defensive brain on the field? I don't know if the Colts. He's the Anzalone of the team. Do we have Detroit fans in here? Yeah, he's the green dot. He's the green.
Yeah,
dot.
we do.
He's the green dot.
I know he's caught.
I love that the Lions fans come post win. They want to hear how depressed they all are after playing their juggernaut. That's awesome.
Yeah, there was one trolling us earlier, but I ignored it.
That's fine. I think that's that. I mean, that says good for him, I guess. I don't like.
No, I mean,
thanks for the view.
You know how? I mean that franchise. Do you know how starved they have been for a team like what they have now?
Don't do it.
No, I'm not saying anything bad. I'm being real. Those fans have stuck with just horrendous teams for the better part of really the last century and a half. They deserve to have a team where they can come on here and troll other teams. That's awesome that they're able to do that. They've struggled for so many years. I don't think you really see any people outside of Packers and Bears and stuff like that really really unhappy that the Lions are not, or that they're a great team. We should all be.
This is the window, right?
I'm excited for the city of Detroit. I told you last week, one of my best friends growing up, he moved from Detroit when we were kids. We've been friends for 30 years. Huge Detroit Lions fan. I've had to go basically my entire adult life with watching him hate the sport of football every fall. Hates it, but he's stuck with them for years. And so now he gets to enjoy this. And that's cool. Seeing somebody that has just been miserable since we were kids. He loves it. And it doesn't get any better than that. So yeah, I'm ecstatic for Detroit fans. That city's needed a team like this. They're fun to watch just as a football fan, just a fan of the sport. I love watching what they're doing right now. It's phenomenal. So yeah, I've got nothing but love for the Detroit Lions. Nothing but love.
But yes, to answer your question, Zaire Franklin is the green dot. I think definitely a guy that I think that necessarily gets a little bit overhated, I would say, because I do think that I posted it like Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick agrees with me. He was on his midseason all-pro team or whatever. Like, I think Zaire Franklin's a really, 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 really good player that's had an up and down year. Really bad, really up and down year. Last year, I think it was without a doubt, I was like, extend Zaire Franklin. He was having that kind of year. It hasn't been the same. But I do think I don't think it's some sort of fluke. He just doesn't have the turnover numbers. I think that's what gets people excited about linebackers. Linebackers are kind of a tough position to evaluate, if we're being honest, because you can fit the run infinitely different ways. So it's usually a team thing before it's an individual performance from the linebackers. So I think that gets you in trouble sometimes.
I just think for me, it's like
I don't think when you look at EJ Speed, on the other hand, that is a guy that I don't think that you're going to sprint to go pay. It's going to be a gauge the market thing ultimately.
I caught flack on that one this week.
What?
I said I caught flack on that one this week.
I don't necessarily think they won't re-sign him. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that I don't think they will want to. They will want to.
Priority.
What?
I don't think it should be a priority.
I don't necessarily think it will be. I think it's more and a lot of teams will do this with their guys. It's like, hey,
go test the market. This is the number we have. Test the market.
We believe that you are worth.
If not,
I don't necessarily think that's a bad idea either, because I think when you look at EJ Speed and some of how these negotiations go, is like EJ Speed could go find a linebacker needy team and probably get a nice contract. He probably could. When you look at where the Colts are, which seems to also just produce linebackers left and right, and also have a guy like Zaire Franklin and be where they are, they might put a price tag, because you have to think about EJ Speed. He's going to be pushing 30, which isn't necessarily old, but it's not necessarily a young first contract player. He's a really interesting story of a former quarterback from Tarleton State that had worked his way up all the way to go play linebacker. Really cool story. Had some really nice games for the Colts.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that you will sit there and make that a priority to go re-sign, to be honest with you.
Yeah. But they
won't. It's also not. It's usually never with these things. It's usually never. We're just not re-signing you. We're just not interested. Most of the time, it's go look, see what you get.
This is our number. If you can beat that number, great. If not,
that's what happened with Gardner Minshew. So the Gardner Minshew had a really nice year, in a year that they had no business being where they were, and they were like, we will give you, we think that and we won't give you anything more for filling this role on our team. And that's why Chris Ballard, for all the hate that he gets, and deservedly so, I feel like I'm a broken record when I say this, the one thing that he has rarely ever done in his tenure, if not at all, outside of the quarterback position, of course, has not gotten into bad contracts. It's just not something that's happened. You don't sit there and be like, wow, there is a lot of dead money for a guy that does absolutely nothing here. It just doesn't happen. So that's how he kind of skirts that, is like, I'm not going to pay EJ Speed for being anything more than what EJ Speed can be on this team.
Yeah, I think, like I said, there's a lot of tough conversations that need to be had about some guys, and a lot of them, guys that just as fans, we love. I love Jesus. My phone, my wife is blowing me up. I love what Zaire brings as a leader. I really do. And I know he's caught a lot of flack on that here recently, but I really do think highly of him as a person and as a leader. And I think he does some good things on the field. That's what you're saying. I think sometimes you might have to.
WTF Minshew, if you're talking about that guy, sorry to interrupt, you have serious problems. I guess I have serious problems for talking about.
We ignore most of those.
Okay, all right. I have serious.
But I'm
not saying
you do have serious problems.
I have serious problems for talking about Gardner Minshew. I
got asked today if I was
sorry. I'm gonna let Landon monitor the comments. I saw that one. I was like,
no, that's just me.
I don't look at the comments. I got asked today if I was on drugs because I said Phillip Rivers was great for the Colts. So
he was great.
He's a legend.
It is what it is. Yeah, but I just think the Colts are at this crossroads this offseason where it's like, I mean, I put that tweet out and like not to pat myself on the back. I think I did a pretty decent job at nailing the Colts offseason last year. I had draft a pass rusher as a top priority, and they did it.
Did a good job.
This year, I am almost confident I won't get it at all because the Colts are at such a crossroads where they're at, where it's like, what are we? And I think it really is going to come down to these next couple of games of like I don't think Ballard leaves his tenure swing. Like he's going to swing at some point here. I think it'll ultimately be a test of like, where is Anthony Richardson at? If Anthony Richardson starts lighting it up in these next couple games, I don't know how you can sit here and not want to go all out. Not all out, meaning like this is a Super Bowl team, but like we're not a rebuilding team anymore. If Anthony Richardson, like we only get one, and what I mean by that is like Anthony, you only get so much time before you have to pay Anthony Richardson. So if he finishes the year super strong, and you're like year 3 is going to be a big year for Anthony Richardson, the Colts will be absolutely stupid not to maximize a rookie contract if they believe in their guy. Last year he was injured, coming off a shoulder injury to his.
You didn't know what you had.
You throwing shoulder, so you had to be like, this thing could go a billion different ways, and it really has this year. If he lights it up and he finishes the year super strong, and we're like, we have something here, and I don't think they ever thought that they didn't, but it's like, no, well, we have something here. You have to maximize that window, and that will guide your strategy in the offseason. If Anthony Richardson continues to struggle, and you're going, well, now we just need to get probably some sort of stay the course.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting for sure. I mean, I'm sure everybody will disagree with it, like always. But yeah, there's so many ways that we can take, and of course, we'll hit on this more as like it gets closer to time. I think right now, main concern going into Gillette Stadium and beating the Patriots. Right? We've got said it before. This team has everything in front of them. They really do. Even after this, we talked about
a scheduled loss. This was let's come on. Let's just say
nobody expected
this is a scheduled loss.
But not only that, like they went through the gauntlet, right? And unfortunately, I said, like, to me, in order to have a chance to win this division, you had to win at least 2 games through this gauntlet. They did not do that. They went 1-4 through the 5 games. Unfortunately, one of those 4 was to the Texans. So the Texans, for some reason, they're reeling right now.
Which that game wasn't a blowout, by the way.
It wasn't.
A couple things had gone, a couple coin flips in both those matchups, and like the Colts are
it doesn't matter.
I agree. I'm just the results are the results. I'm not trying to say that they shouldn't be. The Texans outclassed the Colts in both matchups, but it's not like these were both blowouts. So when you look at the end of the year, that has to be the absolute focus, is beating the Texans. Like,
it's winning the division. That's your number one priority.
Lurking. Like, I don't care how bad the Jags and Titans are, dumpster fire, whatever. They're lurking.
Yeah, and
Trevor Lawrence will go get healthy. Will Levis has put together. Will Levis has put together what 4 weeks of how many 3 weeks of really good football. Like that's
other than
do not sit here and try and tell me that the Titans game is a gimme. It's not.
No, none of these games.
They're going to have to earn every single one, and I think they know that.
Even in New England, like Drake May, I think since coming on, Drake May has played really good football. Like this isn't just a layup game. This team has not won a game in Gillette Stadium since 2006. I was, still in high school, barely. Getting ready to get out, but team since 2006, the last time this team won in Gillette Stadium. So. It's gonna be a tough game, but they have every chance to still push it and get to. There's 5 weeks to go. To me, the magic number is 10 wins. That was the magic number at the beginning of the season. If this team wanted to make the playoffs in the AFC, 10 wins was the minimum to get you in. I think that to me hasn't changed. I think with the way Denver's playing. I think the Chargers game last night, them losing to Baltimore, was a big game, but you still have the Steelers, you still have the Broncos, you still have the Chargers. These are all teams that, luckily for the Colts, one thing they have done right, and even Miami's kind of lurking right now a little bit with Tua returning. You beat the Dolphins, You beat the Steelers. You hold the tiebreaker, right, in a lot of these AFC matchups. If you can run the table, you can get to 10 wins. I think there's a good chance they can get in. But they have left themselves no room for error. None. If you come out and you drop one of these, if you come out and you drop the game to New England, you're done. If you come out and you drop the game to the New York Giants, you're done. Season's over. Get prepared, start draft season, right? So
I'll be honest. I think my focus, and I obviously playoffs is huge and all part of that. But I think and I know Landon's definitely going to hate me for this. My focus is still going to be on Anthony Richardson because I think
that's his focus.
My focus is still on Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, that's Landon's focus.
That needs to be
okay. So I'm thinking about this rationally. Right now, I don't see this team as a team that's going to compete for the Super Bowl. I just don't. They're battle tested. They faced a lot of adversity this year, but ultimately, unless they get super hot, and because once you get in, anything can happen. I still don't think that they're at that point where we should be talking about them as a team that could really make noise. So for me,
we just saw what happened.
What could change that, and what could change that is the play of Anthony Richardson, because good quarterbacks can take mediocre rosters a lot of places. We've seen it time and time again.
But the roster's got to be mediocre. It can't, like this last week, that wasn't even mediocre.
You're playing a Super Bowl juggernaut, but I see what you're saying. They beat themselves too many times. I agree. There's but I'm saying if Anthony Richardson will still be at the forefront of my mind throughout the remainder of the season, win or loss, because that is what's going to guide what I think is going to be a big Colts year next year. I feel like we say this every year, and I'm going to get a lot of hate for that, but Anthony Richardson is this unique prospect in which you're going in a rookie quarterback that they have not had since Andrew Luck. That's a fact. They have not had a rookie quarterback here in a long time. We're going to be talking about where are we going with Anthony Richardson in the future, and that will be, I think, will start to answer itself.
That'll be determined in the next 5 games.
And as to what's our plan with Anthony Richardson, not saying you're going to have a full evaluation, but that third year, because that third year is so key for quarterbacks, because then you start talking, that's when you start after that third year and you're heading onto that final year of your technical contract, because you're probably going to get some sort of extension or whatever. They're going to need some sort of answer one way or another on how this thing is going to go. And I think that they want to give him the tools to do that. So I don't think that this is some sort of to me, making the playoffs is some sort of consolation prize until this team has made the proper adjustments to be in the elite. And that'll start with having a quarterback that can take them there, which I think the people in here think eventually Anthony Richardson can do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. I'm not going to
I know you're a playoffs first, but to me, that's just a consolation prize, because you're going to go play play Kansas City to the fourth quarter and lose. That's what's going to happen. That's what
we can beat Kansas City.
It would be a consolation prize to get off the fact that this team hasn't gone to the playoffs in when's the last time? 2018. So
2020, Phillip Rivers.
2020. Sorry, forgot that year. This team hasn't gone to a lot of these players haven't been in a playoff game. So that's what to me, that's all consolation, because I'm focused on number 5, that development, see him get better. And then let's think about the third year, how we can fix the things to build around him.
Yeah, if he comes out,
and then you're talking about a team that could go compete with CJ Stroud in the Texans.
If he plays,
so right now, I don't think that's the case.
Yeah. If he plays the way he's played the last 2 weeks and he keeps progressing and you keep seeing him do the little things correct, I think he has the talent to where if he continues to progress through the next 5 games, if they don't, actually, it's so funny because I was talking to my friend Adam about this. I think he's actually in the chat earlier today, because he was messaging me this morning along these lines. If Anthony Richardson continues to progress through the next 5 weeks and he goes on to show you that he can play quarterback in the NFL at even, I'm not even going to say a high elite level through the next 5 weeks, because that's still kind of part of his progression. He's still 22, right? But to where he just doesn't look overwhelmed, to where he's making the correct reads. He is more accurate. He's getting the ball out and putting it in spots. Has the correct base, and he's not making bad situations worse. Just all things that normal young quarterbacks go through. If he's starting to do those things at a high level, then I'll have no worries moving forward. And if that happens and this team doesn't decide to go be more aggressive, right? To me, it is all in. Like if you don't decide to go all in and give him a chance after he's shown improvement to really come out next year and take the league by storm, and you continue to roll out the we like our guys and you re-sign your own, you don't get aggressive, what are we doing? What are we doing? So yeah, that's just kind of where I stand on it. And that's what I told him. If Richardson continues to progress and they don't make the correct, to me, if they don't make the correct aggressive moves to fix the holes on this roster this offseason, then I'm out.
So
this team.
So the way that I get it, like the whole narrative, like this Colts team will be focused on winning and making the playoffs because it's terrible culture to ever think that you're out of it or don't have a chance to
winning matters.
So yeah, I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm saying for Colts film, I am sitting here when I look at this team and I'm not in that locker room or a part of that culture. If I was, my mentality would certainly change, but I'm a third party. So the way that I see it is I'm not really like, I'm not hopeful that this team, because if you go look at where this team has been, it has beat up on the bad ones and lost to the good ones. It has lost to the teams that you consider playoff caliber teams or that will be representing their conference in January. And but it's never going to be bad enough to be a dumpster fire. Well, or I guess 2022 was, but like for the most part, it has never been bad enough to be a dumpster fire. You're at this weird middle grounds right now. For me, the focus is the playoffs will be a consolation prize because if AR takes the steps that we want AR to take, your team will have a chance to be there. Do you guys think Richardson has the tools? Just needs time to conduct. My internet sleuthing tells a QB coach of the same guy we had here in Arizona. I think Anthony Richardson, for the Lions fans that are in here, which is kind of funny, Anthony Richardson's still super young in his quarterback development, so I think it's still tough to say one way or another. I think he's the quarterback that ultimately the AFC does not want to see be good because if he puts it together, it's scary given his physical talent. And some of those flashes that you've seen him make, you don't want to see that consistently. If you're going to be, if he actually puts it together. Now, if is a big
guy that can run over Brian Branch and then simultaneously throw that ball to Alec Pierce.
Yeah, like you don't want it. That's ultimately what the league does not want it. If you're on the 31 other teams, that's what you don't want to see him put all of that together. Now, at this point, that's a big if, and it's been a lot of flashes, a lot of things that you've seen on the football field where you're like, I don't know that I've seen people do that. But then you've also seen a guy that really doesn't know how to play quarterback just yet. So I think it's an absolute mistake for them to, they certainly aren't going to give up on him until the remainder of his contract. I feel pretty comfortable saying that he is going to be, this isn't going to be like a Zach Wilson thing or some other situation. There's plenty of them where like quarterbacks just don't make it for a Trey Lance, another one, like where you're shipping him off because you give up on him. That's not going to happen because of where they drafted him. 1, 2, he's done things already on a football field to warrant like you've seen that play. You're like, oh my God, if we can just put this together, it's going to be a problem. But that if is still going to be massive. That's the way that I look at it. That if is going to be big. But if it happens, it's an absolute problem for for the National Football League. And that's why Indianapolis took him. When you sit there and you looked at, okay, CJ Stroud was probably going to be off the board. Whether they had tried to trade up and get him, we'll never know. Bryce Young was going to be the first quarterback there. I think Chris Ballard knew going into that draft, I'm between Will Levis and Anthony Richardson. I don't think it's a slight on Will Levis whatsoever because he's playing good football right now and has taken some strides in that area. But I think they wanted to take the chance with what Steichen had done with Hurts, obviously, but take the chance on Anthony Richardson. knowing that what he did, it was going to be a long, long road, but if it paid off, they would all look like geniuses. And that's really the risk that they wanted to take.
Well, that's what he said too. If you recall the press conference after he was drafted, Chris Ballard actually did say, he said, what I didn't want to see happen was to him go to another team and be successful. That's what he was.
And that's really the mentality. So I'm not here to say Anthony Richardson has arrived, even though he's put together 2 pretty solid games since the benching. I don't think he's even come close. But there's certain plays in certain moments that he does on a football field where you just don't see other quarterbacks do it. And that's what's dangerous in January, when you see things like that. So it's a long road and a huge if, and it might not work. But I'm not here to tell you one way or another.
Basically, your hope is what the Bills model, right? Like, that's your hope, is what happened with the Bills, where they allowed Josh Allen to grow, and now they have Josh Allen on Sundays. That's the model. That's what you want to happen.
And that's how I think that's kind of where I'm at. So I think just to kind of put a bow on all of this, like, Colts are at a real crossroads, and that's why I thought about the offseason. It's not because I think it's this team is out of the playoffs. They're not. They have everything in front of them, like we've said. I just think that'll ultimately be a consolation prize for the bigger picture, which is how is Anthony Richardson continuing to progress, and what young players emerge and prove that they deserve to be on this roster long term. Because there's a lot of iffy guys in certain situations. So that's kind of my thoughts. So that's why I'm more focused on Anthony Richardson probably than I am on wins and losses, despite being firmly in the playoff race and knowing that winning matters to a lot of people in that building and these fans. But that's the way that I think about it, because I don't think that for the Lions fans in here, these are 2 different teams. I said that when we did the preview show with Destin on Spaces. It was like, these are 2 different teams. And that's okay. The Lions are this is their window right now. Like, you would assume that they can only hold off these head coaching interviews for these coordinators for so long. They've done a miraculous job, and maybe they do it again, and I look stupid. But I don't think you're going to find a team as young and as competitive as they have them now. So, and it's healthy. That's a huge factor too. Now, hopefully David Montgomery's okay. Hopefully Aiden, I understand they lost Aiden Hutchinson, but like, for the most part, they've done on offense, they've remained pretty healthy. So outside of Laporta here and there, but they're deep too. And this is their window. This isn't a window for Indianapolis. This is a team trying to get their quarterback situation ironed out and see if they have something in this guy, with some guys that have a young, solid core. So that's my rant.
It's a good rant to have, man. But we'll be back, definitely. Appreciate everyone that tuned in to 530 that came through. Appreciate all the support. We'll be back for a preview video to talk about the New England Patriots coming in. But it's going to be a good game. We're heading over there to Gillette Stadium. But appreciate you guys. Follow us on all platforms. We're located everywhere. Just type the Blue Stable Podcast. Again, appreciate your support from all platforms. We appreciate you. That's Landon. That's Coach Film Room. This is Culture Shock. And until next time, we will see you. Stay safe. Happy Thanksgiving. And enjoy the rest of your weekend. Happy Thanksgiving, guys.